This war isn't being decided by tanks and missiles alone. It's being fought through identity, resolve, and a ruthless question that hangs over every battlefield. Who believes in this cause enough to bleed for it? On one side stand a fractured force, held together by fear and coercion. On the other, a nation fighting as a single body, clear about who it is and certain about what it's defending. There is no confusion, no hesitation. While politicians bicker and headlines shout about uncertainty, something far more consequential is unfolding quietly out of view. Factories are coming back online. Production lines are roaring to life. An entire continent is retooling for a long war, whether Washington approves or not. The real shock isn't who's wavering. It's who's growing stronger.
So best guess is that at this point in the conflict, the Russians have lost between 1 million and 1.4 million men, with somewhere between 200,000 and 400,000 of those being dead. And the casualty rates have increased from the 750 to 1,000 people per day in calendar year 2024 to probably something closer to 1,500 to 1,600 people by the time we get to the New Year's of 2025, 2026. I said about, I think it's 2 years ago now, that if the Russians keep losing men at the rate they are, they're not going to be able to mount a military force of any size in 6 to 8 years, which when I said that would have put us at somewhere around 2030. It now appears that that date is being moved forward because the Russians are suffering casualties faster than Russian boys can be born. On the Ukrainian side, the situation isn't exactly great either. Keep in mind that any battle in which the Ukrainians do not inflict at least a 4-to-1 casualty ratio is a battle that probably in the long run the Russians have won just because there's so many more Russians. But the Russians are now getting to a situation where they are running out of people who are not ethnically Russian. All of the various ethnicities that make up the Russian Federation that are not that ethnically Russian, they're basically running them dry. And the Chechens are almost tapped out at this point, which is something I never thought I would see. Ukraine doesn't have that kind of problem. Everyone pretty much who's fighting in the Ukrainian side of the war is Ukrainian, so there's a much stronger nationalism factor going in. And we are seeing the weapon systems and the military-industrial complexes of the Europeans spinning up in order to continue providing arms for the Ukrainians. Keep in mind that the Ukrainians have given, keep in mind that the Europeans have given the Ukrainians significantly more military aid than the United States has, and almost a factor of 3 more economic aid. So if the Trump administration changes its minds on a few things, obviously that will affect the war effort one way or another. But the bottom line is that the European military complex is becoming more capable of supporting the war as the Russian military complex is becoming less capable.
What Zeihan exposes is a war shaped less by speeches and by stamina. One side grows stronger through cohesion, while the other hemorrhages capability with every passing month. Europe is no longer waiting for permission. It is building the industrial and logistical muscle needed to sustain this fight. As one engine accelerates, the other grinds itself down, inch by inch, toward exhaustion. What Peter Zeihan ultimately reveals is not merely a shift in power, but a shift in survival. Industrial capacity, national unity, and logistics decide wars long before the final shot is fired. And now, as winter settles across Eastern Europe, theory has collided with reality. The battlefield is about to be consumed by something older than strategy, deadlier than artillery, and utterly indifferent to propaganda. The cold has arrived. For hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers, it may be the last enemy they ever face. When temperatures plunge below -30, war itself slows to a crawl. Metal stiffens. Fuel thickens. Flesh fails. At that point, survival becomes a separate battle, one fought not against an opposing army, but against physics itself. This is where the Russian military now finds itself, trapped in a frozen nightmare where even life hesitates to continue. For centuries, Russian rulers claimed winter as their most loyal defender. Empires shattered themselves against snow and ice, while Moscow waited behind silence and frost. But that myth is collapsing in real time, because this winter is not freezing invading armies. It is freezing Russia's own. Along the front lines, reports describe a force fighting 2 wars at once. Ukrainian fire from above and relentless cold from every direction. Thousands of Russian soldiers are no longer struggling only with incoming shells, but with hunger, exhaustion, and frost creeping into their bones. The supply system, once designed to sustain massive formations, has slowed to a humiliating crawl. In some sectors, ammunition and food are no longer moved by trucks, but by donkeys. Not metaphorically, literally. One soldier described by an animal out of desperation just to move supplies across a 20-kilometer stretch with no vehicles, no equipment, and no prospect of relief. This is not adaptation. This is collapse. As supplies freeze in place, so do men. Soldiers huddle in makeshift shelters with inadequate insulation, lacking modern winter gear, wrapped in remnants of Soviet-era equipment never meant for this war. Many go days without proper meals, others without ammunition, almost all without sleep. And when the body can no longer maintain its temperature, the mind breaks long before the heart stops. Intelligence assessments now point to something unprecedented. The number of Russian troops incapacitated by frostbite is beginning to exceed those wounded by enemy fire. In the 21st century, a self-proclaimed superpower is losing soldiers not primarily to combat, but to cold and hunger. This is more than failure. It is a historical anomaly. The same winter that once halted Nazi advances now stands before Russian forces like a mirror, reflecting the cause of neglect and overreach. Silence has sailed across the snow-covered front. But this is not peace. It is paralysis. Each night has become an ordeal of endurance. And when supply chains fail, command structures dissolve. Orders lose meaning. Ideology evaporates. Only the instinct to survive remains. This logistical catastrophe will be studied for decades as a warning of what happens when quantity replaces competence. Winter has struck both sides of the battlefield, but not equally. Ukraine faces immense hardship, especially as Russian strikes target energy infrastructure almost daily. Power outages under blizzards are no small challenge. Yet Ukraine has endured years of harsh winters under attack. The Russian front, by contrast, is cracking. As the calendar turns toward 2026, the Kremlin's ancient alliance with winter is broken. Snow now immobilizes Russian armor. Tanks freeze solid, engines locked in place. Crews risk death not from explosions, but from exposure. Optics frost over, blinding vehicles before they ever fire a shot. Once fuel stops flowing, these machines become nothing more than frozen monuments to failure. Behind the lines, Ukrainian drone operators hunt with ruthless efficiency. Fuel tankers and ammunition convoys glow against a frozen landscape, easy targets in the dark. A battalion without fuel is not a fighting force. It is scrap metal worth millions, abandoned in snowdrifts. In one region, an entire Russian unit surrendered without firing a single shot, not because they ran out of bullets, but because their vehicles froze solid and hypothermia began claiming lives. This is what happens when outdated doctrine collides with modern warfare and merciless weather. And yet, despite everything, Putin continues repeating history's worst mistakes. Roughly 710,000 soldiers have been concentrated across the Ukrainian plains, an unimaginable logistical burden in winter conditions. These men must be fed, clothed, heated, armed, and transported every single day. But the treasury sustaining them is collapsing into massive deficit. Russia's war has ceased to be a conflict with another country. It has become a campaign of exhaustion against its own population. And now, horrifying reports suggest the state has crossed a moral boundary from which there is no return. The elderly, the seriously ill, people with mental disabilities. They are being sent to the front to fill the gaps left by staggering casualties. Prisons emptied of vulnerable inmates. Individuals once deemed unfit for service now declared expendable. Fitness is no longer measured by capability, only by whether someone is still breathing. This is not mobilization. This is liquidation. Images and testimonies show disabled individuals advancing on crutches, elderly men in their 60s handed rifles instead of pensions, mentally impaired youth sent into minefields without understanding where they are or why. This is not an army's error. It is the unraveling of a regime. Meanwhile, Ukraine's thermal surveillance sees everything. Against the snow, groups of freezing soldiers huddled together glow like beacons. The physics of heat betrays them. Russia's obsession with numbers collapses under the combined weight of technology and winter. These 710,000 soldiers are not strength. They are a drain. Every day they consume resources that no longer exist. Every day they accelerate the depletion of Russia's future. Captured soldiers, ordinary men, not strategists, tell the same story. Units reduced from dozens to a handful. Bodies everywhere. Frozen ground concealing mass graves beneath metal plates. This is not victory. It is erasure. At home, the consequences are just as severe. Russia's cities are beginning to freeze. Aging heating systems rupture under pressure. Entire communities lose warmth as pipes burst and boilers fail. Spare parts are unavailable. Software cannot be updated. Sanctions have turned basic maintenance into an impossible task. Citizens sit in dark apartments watching propaganda while radiators go cold. Strategic slogans mean nothing when homes freeze. And this kind of suffering ignites anger faster than defeat at the front. Transportation networks are failing as well. Railways, the arteries of state, are choking. Critical components can no longer be sourced. Inferior replacements fail under stress. Logistics collapse not only for civilians, but for the military itself. Against this backdrop, Ukrainian intelligence offers something extraordinary. Surrender programs designed to receive those who laid down their arms, especially the elderly and disabled. Warm food, medical care, protection under international law. The dignity denied to them by their own government. The irony is devastating. The enemy treats them better than their state ever did. This winter is not merely a season. It is the moment when military doctrine and economic reality implode at the same time. A freezing army, a starving population. No regime has survived such a convergence for long. The numbers confirm it. Deficits are exploding. Revenues are collapsing. Oil and gas income is shrinking. Emergency funds are draining fast. The war consumes billions every day while income evaporates. This is not sustainable. It is terminal. History always asks the same question. When a leader grows this large, how long before the country disappears beneath his shadow? The answer may already be written in the snow.